Imagine two people go through the exact same trauma. A sudden job loss, a painful breakup, or even the loss of the loved one. One spirals into depression, unable to cope. The other somehow managed to adapt, slowly rebuild, and move forward. Same event, different response. Why? What makes the difference? One possible answer: resilience. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Katia Batista, psychiatrist, and today I want to explore why resilience matters deeply, not just in everyday life, but for the lens of psychiatry. In psychiatry, resilience is not about simply bouncing back. It's about the capacity to adapt in the face of adversity and how this capacity influences our mental health, shapes our stress response, and even determines our vulnerability to psychiatric disorders. Is not a personality trait, it's a dynamic process shaped by early life experiences, environment, neurobiology, and learned coping mechanism. From a psychiatric standpoint, resilience involves several systems. Cognitive flexibility. It refers to the mental ability to shift thoughts and adapt behaviors in response to changing environments, demands, or perspective. Is a key component of executive functioning mediated by the prefrontal cortex. In the context of resilience, cognitive flexibility plays a crucial role. Individuals with higher cognitive flexibility are better able to reframe negative experiences, generate alternative solutions to problems, adjust to setbacks without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. This adaptability allows them to respond more effectively to stress or trauma rather than remaining fixed in rigid or maladaptive thought patterns. Research has shown that cognitive flexibility is associated with lower risk of depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric disorders, and contributes to faster psychological recovery after adverse life events. Emotional regulation. This one refers to our ability to manage emotional responses in a way that is adaptive and healthy. It doesn't mean suppressing emotions, but rather being able to recognize, understand, and modulate them, especially under stress. In psychiatry, this skill is seen as a key component of resilience. Individuals who can regulate their emotions are less likely to be overwhelmed by adversity and more likely to recover from setbacks. They are also better equipped to engage in problem solving, maintain relationships, and protect their mental health. Strengthening emotional regulation helps prevent the escalation of distress into clinical symptoms. Social connections play a crucial role in resilience. Humans are inherently social beings, and having strong, supportive relationships can act as a buffer against psychological stress. From a psychiatry standpoint, individuals with consistent social support, whether from family, friends, peers, community, tend to experience lower levels of anxiety, depression, stress-related disorder. These connections offer not only emotional comfort, but also practical help, perspective, and a sense of belonging in the presence of at least one stable and emotionally supportive relationship, especially from early life, is considered a protective factor that can mitigate the impact of trauma or adversity, strengthening social bonds, encouraging meaningful interactions, and reducing isolation are all key strategies in promoting resilience, both in clinical practice and preventive mental health. While psychological and social factors are essential in building resilience, we also need to consider its biological side. Resilience is not only shaped by our mindset or environment, it's also influenced by our brain and how our brain responds to stress. Research shows that people with higher resilience tend to have more balanced stress response, including healthy regulation of cortisol and effective functionings of areas like the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, which help with emotional control and threat response. In other words, resilience also have a neurobiological foundation. Our ability to bounce back from adversity is partly linked to how our nervous system processes and recovers from stress. Then again, why people react differently to trauma. Not everyone exposed to trauma will develop a psychiatric disorder. Why? Because resilience buffers the psychological impact. For example, two people experience a breakup, a miscarriage, or even more. One develops chronic anxiety, panic attacks, or depression. The other grieves, processes, adapts, and reintegrates the experience into their life story. Factors influencing this include childhood attachment and caregiving, previous exposure to stress, access to support systems, genetic predisposition. Definitely, all of them play a significant role. So, when resilience is low or compromised, even moderate stress can exceed a person's coping capacity and trigger symptoms. Why resilience matters in psychiatry. In clinical practice, I see how resilience plays a role in burnout in professionals, recovery from psychosis or trauma, adjustment disorder, and other stress related disorder, trauma and stress related disorder, coping with chronic illness or grief, Low resilience may prolong recovery, increase relapse risk, or cause avoidant behaviors. Now that we understand resilience is not just a mindset or a personality trait, but a dynamic process shaped by both internal and external factors. The next question is, can we build resilience? And if so, how early does it begin? Imagine this: two children grow up in households filled with instability, maybe poverty, maybe emotional neglect. Both face stress, uncertainty, and hardship. But years later, one of them becomes emotionally grounded, able to manage challenges with adaptability and confidence. The other struggles with chronic anxiety, emotional dysregulation, and unstable relationships. What made the difference? The answer lies in how resilience was built or not. During those formative years, resilience is not something we wake up with as adults. It's a developmental process that starts early, often in the relational environment between a child and their caregiver, and is built by how we are taught to face adversity, regulate our emotions, and connect with others. When a child is allowed to experience manageable levels of stress with the right support, their brain learns to adapt. Caregivers who listen without harsh criticism, who provide structure, emotional safety, and consistent encouragement are laying the groundwork for resilience. Think of a child who makes a mistake. Do they get punished harshly, or are they guided to learn from it, to try again, to solve the problem with support? That difference, repeated over time, shapes how their brain responds to challenges in adulthood. I also know from psychiatry that children who grow up believing they can succeed, who are taught to ask for help, who feel seen and emotionally safe, are more likely to develop resilience and later in life have lower risk of anxiety, depression, or maladaptive coping strategies. So, yes, resilience can be built, and the earlier the better. It's not about avoiding pain or failure. It's about learning how to walk through it with support, with meaning, and with hope. That's why modern psychiatric care includes protective interventions. We don't just treat symptoms, we strengthen internal and external coping resources. Again, yes, resilience can build, but even in adulthood, psychotherapy plays a critical role, not just in healing trauma, but in equipping individuals with tools to regulate emotion, challenge dysfunctional belief, and create meaning from adversity. Evidence based approach such as cognitive restructuring, mindfulness-based therapy, self-compassion training, and even reflective journaling have shown positive effects in enhancing resilience, particularly in those going through burnout, grief, post-traumatic stress. Let me briefly share countless adults who experienced deep personal loss or long-term emotional exhaustion were able to reveal a strong sense of self, restructure their coping styles, and living fulfilling lives not by erasing their pain but by finding ways to carry it with strength. From a clinical psychiatric standpoint, we know that low resilience is linked to increased vulnerability to many psychiatric conditions that already I have been mentioned through this video. But building resilience acts as a protective factor, reducing symptom severity and improving overall functioning. I also cannot ignore the impact of social determinants, poverty, violence, chronic exclusion, lack of community support. This can really erode resilience. On the other hand, a safe, validating, and supportive environment, even later in life, can enhance the capacity to bounce back. This brings us to a hopeful fruit grounded in neuroscience, neuroplasticity. The brain is not fixed. Even after years of operating through dysfunctional patterns, it can rewire itself in therapy through safe relationships and with sustained reflection and effort. And this is empowering. Resilience is not static. It's not something you either have or don't. It's a dynamic, evolving capacity that can be nurtured over time with guidance, with care, and above all, with the belief that change is possible. Thank you for joining me today. If this topic resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more psychiatric reflections grounded in science and compassion. Thank you.